Hello and welcome to episode, oh goodness knows, however many we've done now, John. Episode 6 of Phil Grills John, or now we've called it Let's Grill John because it's a bit more kind. It takes the agency away from me. Today we're going to be looking at one of Wilhelm Steinitz's games. Steinitz is someone that Chris Russell is going to cover in our next episode. Ahead of the Steinitz Memorial Tournament, which is happening, I believe it starts on Sunday. What do you know about Steinitz, John?
Nothing.
Excellent. Right, well, I don't know much either, and we will find out more about him in the episode. But for now, I've got a game of his from the World Championship in 1892. How was 1892? What do you remember of it?
Yeah, not too bad. Coming to the end of Victoria's reign, maybe the high point of the empire, so what's not to like, hey?
Absolutely. So, yeah, actually, you may be able to hear. I've got some music from 1892 playing in the background. I've got Sibelius, which is going to accompany us on this journey through Steinitz Shigerin from 1892. So, let's start, I suppose. So, this was a Berlin. So, this was before the Berlin basically became the Grandmaster's draw paradise. So this is what marks it, the knight f6 line of the Ruy Lopez, where black is just getting some early play against the e4 square, and in return for piece play, white tends to gain a pawn here. You can do that with something like takes. And then there's all sorts of things with taking this pawn, and then this knight comes back here, and it's all a bit of a mess. But this is 1892, John. They weren't up to speed with all of these tactical necessities. So we have a much quieter game here with d3, d6, and c3. Okay, so what might be the idea of c3 here?
Stopping the knight from coming in on either b4 or d4.
Yeah, that's one thing. What else?
It allows the queen to come out.
Yeah, so the main thing here is we're looking at the d4 square.
Mm-hmm.
So that's white is going to try to play d4 at some point, being supported by this pawn. But yeah, absolutely, this queen may be able to come out to any of these squares as well. And it might offer the bishop a safe haven on c2 as well. But yeah, it's just a very, very calm way of playing. And this g6 stuff that Shigerin plays isn't really played anymore. It's not really a thing. Black tends to favour bringing the bishop out this way instead to support any potential kingside attacks. But again, we have to view this through the prism of 1892, when chess theory was not really a thing. So knight b2, bishop g7, and then let's think about what white wants to do here. So white has still got some problems with these queenside pieces. Can you see a way to kind of unravel everything and make sure that white can just get all their pieces going? Because when you've got this kind of pawn structure, these pawns just in the way. That's why the knight had to come this way, because it couldn't come via c3. So what might be...
Well, you said you're going to play d4 at some point, so you could do that, I suppose. But that's not really going to help you. You could push your knight to c4, opening up a route for the bishop. But then I guess you're being defended by the pawn on the e-file, so it's not as if he can push the pawn and suddenly cause you a load of problems.
So if c4, then the knight is fine here, but it's also what's happened. The problem you've got is that it's really just biting on granite here. This knight isn't going to be going anywhere fast. However, having said that, the knight is perfectly well placed here to do what you might want to do anyway. Actually, where does this knight belong? Let's put it back on d2. Where do you think the best square for this knight? Anywhere on the board. If you could pick up this knight and plonk it anywhere on the board, where might you want to do that?
What, even ignoring places where there are already pieces?
I mean, it's just the best, like, the square that knight would have the most
Right now.
influence at the moment, yeah.
E3?
And then where's it going from there?
Um, um, I guess the only real place it can go. Oh, I guess you could put it on C2, but
No, that's more influence. Let's go think more centrally. You want your knights on central squares.
oh, so yeah, then you can go to D5.
Yeah, so you could either go to D5 or just, as you say, sit it on E3 where it looks at a lot of decent squares that black may wish to use, and we've just got some options. So yeah, knight C4 is absolutely one way of doing that. There's a bit more flexibility with what Steinitz chose, though. He chose knight F1, which has it may work out exactly the same thing, but it does give you the option of G3 instead. It's just slightly more flexible as a way of playing, and it also means that if you played knight C4, it means that after A6 you would have to take this knight, because if you go back to B4 you've got this fork. So just that knight coming. Knights tend to prefer going, if you're going to launch a knight up the board, they tend to prefer going backwards first so that they've got more options, because if you put it forward before going backwards, there might be some other stuff happening. So yeah, if A6 happened here, you'd have to take this, which is not necessarily something we want to do. But we may. I'm sure it's absolutely fine as well. But yeah, knight F1 is the move played by Steinitz. The same kind of idea, so castles. And then bishop A4 anyway, without even being pressed into action. That bishop is probably going to come back and sit on the C2 square, just so that it can have some good influence up this diagonal when we play the move C4, D4 and start getting rid of these pawns. What do you think black's way of playing here is? So black's got castle, they've got 3 of their minor pieces out, they've got a fine, their centre is absolutely fine. What do you think the black strategy should really be here?
Well, I've got a pawn chain pointing towards the king side, so they should probably start looking at getting pieces over that side.
Okay.
There's a
How
nice.
are you going to do that?
I guess there's a sort of nice semi-outpost on G4 for the knight.
That's not a semi-outpost; it can be kicked immediately.
Okay. But I guess if you do that, you're then forcing white to break down their pawn structure around.
No, a little bit. Like, I mean,
H3
tends to actually H3 and A3 tend to be okay, because the only square you're leaving behind are these, and if the king's castling, then it might easily have some different squares that it might be able to go to, give it some luft. So we're not really, black isn't going to be interested in provoking this move, I don't think. It may also well be that if after H3 it might give this knight an extra option to come in this way instead. So, but yeah, you're right, it's not so clear just from kind of looking for active moves that for this bishop, where this bishop might go. It might go to E6, it might go to G4, that would be a pin. It can't come out this way because the bishop would just grab the knight. So that's one thing. But the main thing of this position is that black's castled and white hasn't. So what do you think black's actual strategic plan should be based on white hasn't castled?
Try and prevent white from castling.
And how might that happen? Where should black be playing? If you're trying to open up these kind of lines towards the king, while the king, it's going to take 2 moves for them to castle because this knight's in the way. How might you do that? Where should you be playing?
I just can't see any way that you can really do anything down the queen side at this point.
Why are you going down the queen side? The king's here.
So I guess try and break open the pawn structure. So maybe push your d pawn.
Lovely. Yeah, d5 is the best move here. Yeah, you're just putting pressure on the e4 pawn, and you're just generally just opening up some lines towards where the king is going to be. This is your classic pawn break. The pawn can't escape forwards, and yeah, it just means that probably white has to bring this knight back to where it was to defend it, because if he goes to g3 instead, then I think takes, and then what you're going to get here is an exchange of queens, and white now can't castle.
But you could still take with the knight there, surely.
Yep, and then the knight will cape back, and we get the same thing.
And then same thing. Yeah.
Whoops! In that case, in that spot, the bishop could actually take the this as well. But then, look at these minor pieces. They're just, oops, absolutely garbage. None of them are doing anything. And black is doing well. So that's why the knight would probably have to come to back to d2, and then yeah, black is doing absolutely fine here, and they can start to potentially open up there, and then maybe come into, this is definitely a pseudo outpost, because if you're going to encourage this guy, then there's going to be another outpost opening up there. So all of this stuff would have been good for a triggering, but he did not play d5. He played knight d7, which is again fine. I mean, but it's missing the point here. I mean, you commented earlier that this pawn chain generally indicates kingside play, and that's fine. But what this knight is doing is okay. It's getting out of the way of this pawn. This pawn may wish to come forward and start doing stuff on the king side, but bringing the knight here just completely blunts the bishop. And I suppose the knight has options to come and annoy the white square bishop on a4, but in which case it may have just been a better idea to play knight h5 instead, maybe, to not inhibit that bishop. But yeah, d5 is just clearly the best move here, because white is still 2 moves away from castling, and black should be trying to open up as many lines as possible. Anyway, 8, knight d7 happened, knight e3. So I mean, the other thing with this move is it doesn't really put any pressure on white, and white can just unravel now quite happily. Knight c5, bishop c2 to help defend this pawn as well. Knight e6. So black has done the same kind of thing as white. White has taken 3 moves to move this knight to e3. Black has taken 4 moves to get their knight to e6. And both of them are doing things on dark squares, but that's not really, I don't know. I suppose this knight can jump into f4, but I think this position is now decent for white because this bishop is completely inhibited. Okay, but what next? How is white going to do things now? We've got a couple of little pawn changes here and a couple of bishops that might wish to do stuff. So I'd suggest that is the direction of play, considering both knights are on the king side as well. How are you going to start making things happen on the king side here?
Well, I guess you can hop your knight into that outpost on d5, which opens up the dark square bishop.
Okay, so let's look at this, knight d5. Now,
and that means you can also hop your knight onto g5, and it's protected by the bishop now as well if you wanted to.
Well, black's got 2 pieces as well.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so that's the thing here. While this structure looks a bit clumsy, there aren't actually many squares now in the opposition half of the board that white can use with pieces. So knight d5 is one. Knight d5 it might be a useful move, but I think it's not going to have a particularly good future there because there's nothing really else it can do. g5 is covered, f5 is covered. Let's just do these in red instead. All of these squares in the black half of the board are covered. White can't use these. And the key thing here is that all 4 5th rank squares on the king side are controlled by black. So we need a different mechanism here to try to make something happen on one of these squares. Otherwise we're not going to make any progress here as white. So what? I've given you a bit of a loaded question, like how can white do this instead if they can't really use these minor pieces?
Is there any reason why white wouldn't castle at some point, like now?
Think about it. What's going on here is that all the pawns are on the board, so there's no open lines to the king. So there's no actual... like, it's not a thing where white will have to castle. And what you also have here, we talked about kingside play, that means this rook is still on h1.
Okay. So, like, at what point do you decide whether or not you should castle or not? I mean, how do you make that decision? Because it's always something that I'm confused about, because obviously opening theory is, like, roughly try and get yourself castled if possible.
Okay.
Is it just simply situational?
Yeah, so what I said about there being all the pawns on the board is definitely relevant in slightly quieter systems, or ones where you don't get an exchange of pawns. Because normally white will play d4 or black will play d5 or something will happen to challenge these guys, but nothing has yet, which means that certainly the e file is completely rammed shut. There's 4 pieces on it. It also means that the other diagonals you might have aren't open either. It also means that there's no way of getting knights in to start worrying the king. So it's definitely less important to castle when a position is closed like this one. But you also may wish, as we've said, to start entertaining the idea of attacking, because whichever side your opponent's castled on, there's no better square for the rooks to be on than on their starting squares if you're wishing to go after the king, whichever side it castles on. So, but here the move is, white isn't just going to start hacking up black, but they can play moves which are
So a knight on g4.
So knight on g5 would be helpful. I mean, your idea of getting one there isn't a bad move at all.
But with the knight on g4, for example, you can then start attacking the h6 square.
Like here. Okay, so yeah, we've got things going on here. So knight g4 would be an interesting idea. But again, what's going to happen here is these are targets. It's the same as when you brought your knight to c4. I can start targeting. I can play f5, which is something I want to do myself anyway, to open up this rook, open up this bishop, and just gradually, while your white's king is still in the centre, it makes sense to attack the centre. So here, white would just have to meekly retreat again, and then things can start to happen. This is now quite a big pawn chain. So yeah, we don't want to be necessarily doing things with pieces here. We want to be doing things with pawns to start clearing some lines in the right way. So h4 was played by Steiners. The idea is to control g5, and also just to, white hasn't castled, there's no imminent danger. We can maybe get this rook going. And it's going to take 3 moves probably for us to be able to castle this side and then swing this rook over and start doing more damage over here. Hello to Kev McCarthy in the Twitch chat. Welcome to Let's Grill John. Okay, so 97 was played by black. Black is going to transfer some pieces over to the king side, but as we will see, it's a little bit late. Here, it would have been better for black to start doing some actual... So if someone's coming at you on the flank, that means they might be abandoning the centre, right? So knight f4 would have been an idea, because the idea of g3, then the knight can just sit here and then it's blockading everything. d5 is all... d5 and f5 are also possibilities at some point, but yeah, knight e7 is just a bit wet. Doesn't really... I don't think it really achieves anything. It's bringing the knight into sort of the right kind of areas, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, h5. So the h file is definitely going to be open now. Black plays d5, but it's a bit late now. So takes, and now. So what we said was white didn't necessarily want to open up lines towards their king. But they still haven't. Like, the e-file is still pretty shut. The dark square bishop isn't going to be looking anywhere near the king. Okay, we might have to start thinking about this rook, but white here is just doing kind of all the right things and just has gained an open file, which is going to be the difference here. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5, so now these bishops are both very much in play, as is the rook. This knight might be able to join the party, the queen as well. White has 5 pieces, all of which are doing good things. Okay, so take a minute here. Think about the lines that have opened for you. So we've had pawns disappear from here. These 2 pawns have disappeared basically, yeah? In the last 5 moves. And then we've had pawns disappear from here. So the lines that have opened up are the H file for white, the F file for black. What else? What other lines have opened? Just trace a line through those circles.
So yeah, there's a diagonal from the queen to H1.
Yep, this one is a little bit.
And yeah, we've got the bishop, the white, both of white's bishops, but the light squared bishop with a pawn push will open out for.
Possibly. What else? Where else could this bishop go? Which other lines opened?
Yeah, the line up.
Which other line?
The line up to A4.
No, that's not where a circle is. That was already open.
Oh,
There's this one as well. Through that circle on F7. So the F7 pawn disappearing means that that king is very weak on the light squares towards it there. So this is the main guy. We've got a queen and the king on this diagonal, which is open because this pawn has disappeared. Which is problems.
So you can push your bishop on, on there, force the queen away, and then move your knight, and then the other knight's pinned.
There we go. So this kind of stuff is going to happen. Queen c6. You wanted to play knight g5 immediately to start looking at h7 and the knight. The problem you've got at the moment is that this will happen, and then you're a pawn down, and there's actually a mate threat here from these 2 guys. So we need to be a bit careful. But the point is now that this knight is pinned, and yeah, we want to put pressure on pinned pieces, but actually it's got 2 defenders at the moment, and we don't need to let black off the hook here. So basic plan here of just bringing in as many pieces to the attack as possible, because this is permanent. This is a permanent weakness now. It's going to be impossible for black to ever put a pawn on this diagonal, and it's going to be impossible for them to really shut this H file down in earnest. So white tries bringing the last piece into the attack, which is this guy. So queen e2, bishop d7, bishop e3.
What's that move about?
Which one?
Bishop e7.
Bishop
d7.
Bishop d7 is connecting the rooks, just developing the bishop. Nowhere else it can go because this knight is pinned. King h8. So it's getting off the diagonal, but it's now steadfastly on this file. Castles and rook a to e8. Right. Okay, I would like a plan and a move here. So you know what we've got. We've got 2 amazing bishops. We've got a fantastic rook, but we haven't landed a haymaker yet. But these are permanent weaknesses we could try to take advantage of.
I mean, I still quite like the look of moving a knight onto g5. But there's also the option of getting the dark square bishop onto h6 and just breaking the bishop out.
Absolutely, yeah, we want to remove defensive pieces.
And you're developing your rook in a way that is not going to be easily dislodged, and you can bring your other rook across and protect it and start putting a huge amount of pressure on.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you play bishop h6, they're not going to take it because, as you say, that would allow the rook into the outpost as well, and then yeah, this gives a tempo for this rook to come up and join in. So black isn't going to take that. Just in the chat there, I just need to confirm. I'm pretty sure it's Sibelius. It's Sibelius. This is from 1892. That's why we got this music on. This game is from 1892. Frank and Rock in the chat there. Yeah, black isn't going to take this. So instead they're going to just sort of try to blockade, really, I think, and just get some things going. Now the knight is unpinned, I think knight f4 would make a lot of sense. Attacking the queen, attacking g2, maybe thinking of coming into h5. White is still doing well here, but yeah, the issue you've got is that black is doing something, right? And if you remove the defender now, I think white might even be in a bit of trouble here, because what this knight has done is it's taken advantage of this bishop disappearing, and it's going to be very hard to dislodge. And you've got this fork as well. So if queen f1, it's actually possible for black to now just, I think, probably take this. And then the knight will drop on f3, and suddenly black is a pawn up. And all the weaknesses on the dark squares can't be taken advantage of by white because you've got rid of it. So it's one of those ones where, yeah, you want to remove defensive pieces, like the bishop, but if you don't have anything afterwards to mop up with, on the dark squares that have been left, you're not going to get a mate. So we need to be a bit more, again, just a bit calmer here, and think about. I think the plan is good, but we don't particularly necessarily want a rook here if we're going to make things happen. So what else might be an alternative way of blending extra weight to the h6 square with an alternative?
You could get the queen on that diagonal, so move to d2.
Queen d2 is the best move. Yeah, the idea is to just eye up the queen coming to h6. It's when you've got a pawn structure like this around the king, all the weaknesses are on dark squares. It makes sense to put your predominantly dark square piece, so the dark square bishop and the queen on a dark square will just look at more dark squares than it does light, right? So it just makes sense from a practical point of view as well. And also getting it off the square that the knight can hit it might be quite nice. Queen d2 is the best move. Steinitz chose queen f1, which has the same kind of idea, but it's a bit longer winded. This queen is going to come to h1 instead, maybe, and do so. I mean, let's just give black a random. Actually, to be fair, the move that black played was fairly random in the circumstances. He played a5, which I don't really think has anything to do with the position. There are ideas here of playing rook takes h7 immediately. It doesn't quite work at the moment because after knight g5, which is the idea, because you're taking advantage of this pin, you're threatening queen h8, queen h7 mate. Black can actually just play rook f5, and then you have no mate. There's no way through here. It looks very good, but you have just given up a rook for nothing. But that kind of stuff is going to be possible, maybe later on. So, a5 was played, and so yeah, we're looking here for ways to continue the attack, ways to continue to open lines towards the king. We've got the h-file, we've got this diagonal, we've got the h-file.
Do you not need to protect that bishop in terms of the next?
So you're worried about this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it though, that's the issue. Because you
can just bring another pawn in, right?
If a4 happens, then this might start to become a thing.
Yeah. So assuming that is going to happen, is the point then that you play quickly to avoid black having a chance to play a4?
Yeah, but you need to play in the correct way, the correct side of the board as well. So we've already made lots of inroads into the king side. Black has just played a flank move. Where should we play? There's one line towards the king we have not conquered yet.
Yeah, there's the diagonal into the king.
Straight to it. So let's disrupt the pieces on that line.
So push your d pawn.
Absolutely,
And then
here we go.
takes,
This kind of
takes.
stuff is happening. It also gives the queen a potential way out here. Not that it could have. So the reason why, let's just have a look at this actually, because you might think, right, okay, why didn't white just play d4 immediately? Why might white? Try saying that 10 times. Why might white have not played d4 immediately? What happens? Okay, it's going to open up this diagonal, but what else is that opening up?
Yeah, well, potentially opens up the king to attack. So I guess you want to move your king to b1.
No, think about what else is happening when this pawn disappears.
Oh, you're opening up the e file.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why Queen F1 was played, to get out of the way first, so that there's no issues there. So yeah, a5, d4, lovely move. Starting to really zone in on the black king, opening up the last line to that king. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. With a fork. Bishop takes knight, which is not a move you want to play. You don't want to be getting rid of the only defensive piece around the king. And then we've got, well, you've actually only got two options here because this pawn is pinned. So which one are we going to do it with? Think about.
Well, obviously you want to obviously you want to think that it's going to be the bishop because it's a lower value piece, but I'm guessing that the rook might be the right one at this point. I guess because you switch, you go the exchange down, but you're putting the king under a huge amount of pressure with the bishop, not with the
absolutely.
rook.
The main thing here is these pawns. The fact that they're on light squares, therefore they don't look at dark squares. You want to keep your dark
so the
square
bishop is more valuable than the rook at this point.
By miles. Yeah, it's not even. See, we got Tony Miles into an episode again. It's it's just an easy decision here. So rook takes d4. So what I like about this position and these kind of positions is that the material is dead level. Okay, white has the bishop pair, but white hasn't needed to. This is just a purely positional grind. There's been no flashy. There's no flashiness. So. Okay, I mean this is a sacrifice, I guess, but this kind of position just shows you how ruinous black's position is. That there's just all these holes and lines that they have helped white to open up, and it's not gone well. Okay, so
just ignore the sacrifice.
Well, let's play another move. Let's say what, a4. Probably going to have, I think, is that what's the best move here?
I guess you can take that pawn because
take this pawn and then you've got this.
Yeah.
If b5, then probably just
drop back.
Well, we might start to threaten stuff over here. White's just given up a pawn now. I don't think there's any really good way to ignore it, unfortunately. So knight takes d4. However, this leads to mate in. Well, in the game, it leads to mate in 6, but I think it's actually mate in 7. So, how can we start to really get a mate here? We've got 4 attacking pieces, which is far too many. You genuinely need 3. 2 to do the mate, and maybe a third to sacrifice itself along the way. But we've got 4, which is just going to be plenty. So, what could we do to start opening up these lines and just go at that king?
Well, if you take the knight, then you're going to have to block something, yeah.
And then, the rook's actually doing quite a nice job there. It's hard because, we want to put pressure on pinned pieces, but you can't actually get a second piece to look at this rook very easily because the queen's on the wrong colour complex.
Yeah.
And this is going to take 2 moves. This will take 2 moves. So we've actually just got this kind of in hand whenever we want it.
Yeah, so I guess you can move the. I don't know. I guess you don't want to give up the queen. I was just thinking you get the queen onto c4.
No, we don't want to swap queens.
Yeah.
We looked at a similar line earlier.
Getting the bishop onto h6.
Do we want the
No,
bishop there?
No, not really.
What did we want there?
The queen.
Yes. Let's make that happen.
How?
Well, we did look at it earlier. We looked at a similar line.
We're getting it onto d2 and then.
No. Get your queen to h6.
g1, h2.
But that's not forcing enough. You need to be forcing moves, otherwise I'm going to take this bishop and I'm going to be a whole piece up. Whole rook up even. Forcing moves. Black Dima Gambitier in the chat has seen it. He knows what's coming.
Rook h4.
That's not a forcing move. What kind of moves are forcing?
Moves that are going to attack the queen.
Or
rooks.
Or keep going.
King.
Yes. Checks are forcing moves. They're actual forcing moves. Black can't, do anything.
So you want to take the knight then?
Nope. Our job is to get the queen
just
here.
Sacrifice your rook.
As I said, we've got 4 attacking pieces. That's too many.
So just take h7.
Take h7. Here we go. And we get this mating net that forms now. We've got 3 attacking pieces on both colour complexes. Queen h1 check. King g7. Keep going.
Now you can take the knight if you want.
You could take the knight, but this was our plan, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, so queen to h6.
If you play queen to h6, then I think it's just as good as the game. So yeah, queen to h6 would happen here. Then what?
Queen to g5.
This is still good enough, but I think we're gonna have to. The reason why g5.
Oh, now you can do the takes without the rook blocking.
The king might go this way now. So there's a reason why queen h4 check is better. Why might h4 be a better square to check on than g5? I know it's tempting to put queens next to kings, but what's the advantage of h4?
You're covering a different rank.
You're covering the 4th rank and the h file still.
Yeah.
Whereas we're not really interested in. I mean, these squares are all covered, right? We're not interested in the 5th rank, and also the g file is blocked. So yeah, h4 is just slightly better. Let's say king e5 happened. Mate in 2.
Do you take the knight with the queen?
And where's the mate here? This is lovely. This just shows you the value of the 3 pieces. So this bishop's looking down here. This queen's looking down here. This bishop's looking here. So all of those squares are covered.
So you just pop your queen on f4.
Lovely. I think a bit more picturesque here was g4 mate, just to prove that all those pieces are doing what they wanted. This isn't actually how the game finished, but your method is just as good. So bishop h6 instead happened, king f6, and then queen h4. So it's just exactly the same. Here, 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 and then we've still got the 2 alternative checkmates. So yeah, this was Steinitz Shigerin from 1892 as part of their World Championship match. And yeah, it's pretty brutal, but I think we saw there that opening theory was still quite primitive, and Black didn't really. I mean, I think that Chris will cover it more in the episode in his Christery section, but I don't think that these players are yeah, they wouldn't have done much, say 30 years later, against the likes of Capablanca. I don't know. Maybe not here. I mean, maybe by then Shigerin was a bit better. But yeah, this was pretty brutal. And this was a 28 move miniature in a World Championship match. We don't see those anymore. I don't think we'll be seeing them in Carlsen MVL or Carlsen Nepo or whomever it is. So yeah, hope you learned something there, John.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
And hope you guys at home learned a bit as well. I will be back at 9 PM for the First to Four Blitz Challenge, where we'll be playing 7 games of Blitz. The winner gives £7 to a charity of their choice, and that will be at 9 PM British Summer Time. So see you then. And yeah, we've got a lot lined up for the episode this week, haven't we, John? It's going to be a fun one, as always.
Big one, yeah.
But all that remains for me to do is say thank you, John.
Thank you.
And thank you guys at home. See you soon.